So a fire loss, you often have a scene investigation tied up into it because you have to determine where the origin of the loss is. And then so kind of once you have the origin, you kind of say, hey, okay, well, what are the potential ignition sources in that area of origin? And then we want to see, what are kind of some possibility of causation there. And when you have that, so you have a scene investigation tied up into it, and then the other thing you have is what makes fire losses more challenging is that the evidence can be consumed in the fire. And so there's a lot of aspects associated with that. What makes it easier or why people tend to pursue subrogation a lot on fire losses is because, or one of the reasons they might get investigated is just because of the severity of the claim. So an average fire loss is about $70,000 to $80,000. The average severity of a interior water loss is about $12,000, $10,000 to $12,000. And so if I'm looking at just the economics of the claim on a $10,000 to $12,000 water loss, I don't want to spend enormous amounts of money investigating anything, pursuing any type of subrogation case. I might have legal fees, I've got processing fees and all this other, and just time associated with things. And so what's my return on that investment if I'm in the eyes of a subrogation professional? And then on the flip side of a fire investigation, if it's $70,000, well, I can maybe make a case financially that we want to spend some money to kind of pursue this and check it out. Now, the frequency of fire losses is much lower than the frequency of water losses, though. And so, yes, you have higher severity. Water losses have lower severity. The frequency of water losses is much higher than the frequency of fire losses. And so what most people don't know is that next to storm damage, hail and wind, the next category for frequency of property damage is associated interior water loss. And so what's unique about that is that, or the luxuries, I guess I could say, about interior water loss relative to fire losses is that I always say the origin of the loss is known. It's where the water's springing out, right? And the other thing that you can do that makes it easier is that I can usually remove that evidence and collect it without occurring where the leak occurred. We can ship that, transport it to the lab. They can recreate the failure, confirm that we have the right pieces of evidence, and then complete failure analysis associated with that. And so that ability to logistically transport, the ability to confirm that with and do the failure analysis in a single location allows for a few different things. One, it allows for the centralization of knowledge with our experts in our that we have in the field. These guys that are in the lab, they will look at hundreds of failures every year as that goes through. And so they are a true failure experts on these products and how they fail and all the little nuances associated with those. I mean, they will see things that, oh, well, if you have this, this that causes by this. And it's a certain feature or characteristic, small little, like the stiffness of a product, or how it may be discolored or anything like that. And they know all these things and what happens to all that. Whereas if you're to use, say, a local vendor that's kind of an engineer that's a jack of all trades, that's your guy you send out whenever you have any kind of product investigation in a home or something like that, might be the first time that they look at something. And so for them to really kind of understand that, they might have to spend hours and hours and hours trying to figure out what it is. Whereas while we'll spend hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours looking at multiple different product failures. And so we can spend that time and that research and that investigation for that specific product failure, and then apply it to numerous failures that come through. And so that's one of the benefits of water losses, and you can just do it more economically. And because you can do it more economically, it also allows you to create what I mentioned before, is programs around that. And so carriers, for them to be, a lot of times what they found was, hey, if we're going to pursue these, we kind of need to group these together so that we can pursue them, and it makes it worth our while kind of going after them. And so we were kind of the expert and the vendor that supported their logistics on these mass tort cases. So various carriers had mass tort cases, and mass tort cases like a grouping of the same product that all failed exactly the same way, and you put those together. And so we were able to support that, the forensic analysis of that, and then also all the logistics associated with that, and really kind of give some insight into how they should necessarily go about that, and more so from the product characteristics.